Hello and welcome to the Executive Pill, the podcast where brilliant leaders from every corner of the world share their secrets to help you lead smarter, influence better, and succeed faster. Think of it as your cheat code for navigating leadership with clarity and confidence. I am your host, Alex D. Tremble Jr., CEO of GPS Leadership Solutions. And over the past decade, I've had the privilege of helping hundreds of executives at Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, in the private sector and nonprofit sector navigate leadership, influence, and culture. This podcast is your shortcut to learning what works from the best of the best. And I promise you this, what you're about to hear today isn't theory. It's proven strategy that you can use today. And before we jump in, here's a tiny request with a massive impact. Please hit that like button. Why? Because we are in the attention economy, and in that attention economy, your click is the fuel that powers these life-changing ideas to reach more and more people. So look, you're not just liking, you're literally leading a movement. With that said, let's make today extraordinary. Today we have with us the amazing Mr. Eric Pliner. See, Eric serves as just an amazing individual, amazing leader, and he is among the most sought after executive coaches and advisors to CEOs, executive teams, and boards of public and private equity-backed companies in the U.S., the U.K., and around the world. He is the former CEO of YSC Consulting, now part of Accenture, and the author of the book Difficult Decisions: How Leaders Make the Right Call with Insight, Integrity, and Empathy. How are you doing today, kind sir?
I'm doing great, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. Side note, for anyone who's watching, if you're not watching, just please know that right behind Eric is this massive bookcase with all these amazing books. And I'll tell you, my wife recently rearranged, and we're going to get some different things in the background right now, like logos and things like that. But I miss my books. I feel like having the books behind me makes me look smart. But most of my new books are on Audible anyway, so y'all can't see how smart I am.
I keep them partly because there are lots of times throughout the day where suddenly I have an idea about something and I think, wait, who did I learn that / steal that from? And want to grab the book off the shelf and pull it down. The problem is then I get distracted and find myself reading instead of working. But I love to be surrounded by books. Always have since I was a kid.
Well, I have to believe that's the case, especially because you've went on and written an amazing book about difficult decisions. And what I'd like to ask you, just starting off, how do you define a difficult decision?
Great question. And, I think the most difficult decisions that leaders face are not usually about things like strategy or operations. They can occupy a lot of mental real estate. But the most difficult decisions are the human decisions. What do we do when we have to make a choice that risks harming someone else, no matter what we choose?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the trade-offs that leaders have to make can be helpful for some people and harmful for others. And the difficulty is, how do I reconcile what I believe about right and wrong in my heart, in my brain, in my body, in my life, with what the world is telling me right and wrong, or helpful and harmful are right now, with the varied interests of all of my very different stakeholders? That's what makes them tough. What's right and wrong? What's helpful and harmful? And what do the people that are relying on me expect? How do I reconcile when those things don't align?
It's interesting because very similarly, we talk about right versus right decisions.
Yeah.
A right versus wrong decision is hard. Like, should I talk to this person or should I punch him in the face? Generally speaking, I probably shouldn't punch someone in the face. So
Probably
those are
not.
easier decisions to make. But as you just talked about, right versus right decisions in situations where both decisions are right in some way, but they are going to impact negatively the other group. Again, focusing on the individual versus the team, focusing on compassion versus justice, focusing on loyalty versus merit. Like all these things, it is perfectly okay and fine and actually justified in many cases to say yes to either or, but you got to pick one, and you're going to negatively impact the other person, or other group. So how do you recommend, how do you reconcile that the strain between the two?
Yeah, I think we don't spend a lot of time investigating or interrogating the sources of our own morality. Like, where do you get the idea that something is right or wrong? What we know is that most people have their sense of right and wrong, their inner sense of morality, developed by about age 10. You can't really change somebody's view of right and wrong dramatically beyond late childhood. And so by the time we get to be adults, we think, well, we know what's right and what's wrong, but we don't spend a lot of time thinking through, well, where did I get that idea? Is it faith-based? Is it family-based? Is it educational? Is it someone I learned from? Is it something I read? And so I always encourage people to start from, when you come to the conclusion that something is right or something is wrong, start by figuring out where you got that idea from. What is the source of your own morality? A lot of leaders and organizations like to talk about values. I have a set of leadership values that I hew to or abide by, or that we ask our teams to follow. But the thing about values, and we're seeing this a lot right now, is that values are aspirational. You can say, well, this is what matters to us. But then when things are on the line, you can back off that and say, well, I still value that, but it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily going to be able to follow it all the time. That's tough, because it doesn't mean you don't value those things. But I think morals are about what you won't stand for, whereas values are about what you ostensibly do stand for. And I think you get a real sense of right and wrong and how you can use that to inform your decision making. When you say to yourself, where do I draw the line? What will I not stand for? And go from there.
So I question here. I mean, obviously a question. That's what we're here to do, is ask questions. So where do you find, so I'll talk about myself and what I tend to teach is, so my background is IO psychology. I'm a behavioralist. And so when we work on IO psychology, industrial and organizational psychology, I work on executive leadership development, organization development. When I like to work with organizations, honestly, I'll tell you this, I'm not the hearts and souls person, and the spirit, like the gushy, but that's not me. Yes, I speak in a way that tends to motivate and inspire people, but at the end of the day, I don't care how you think, and I don't necessarily even care how you feel. I care what your behaviors are, and because behaviors are what other people can see and what actually impact other people. And so, where do you think? I mean, there are some people who would say, well, you know what? Even though, I mean, again, and this is an interesting point you made, at a certain age, it becomes difficult to adapt and or say change how someone describes something as being right or wrong. You can teach them the behaviors and say, hey, look, whether you think this is right or wrong, this is the behaviors we expect, and these are the behaviors we reward, and these are behaviors that we quote unquote punish, and kind of help them. Again, like people can see me, I'm a Black dude. I say this all the time. I don't care if you don't like me because I'm Black. It's okay, as long as you're not a dick to me. Like, as long as the behaviors are in alignment, that's all that matters to me.
Yeah. I started my career in education before I went into leadership development. And one of the things that we used to teach teachers and young people is that you don't have to change your mind about how you feel about someone else. But when you're part of a community, when you're part of a civil society, there are rules that you have to follow about how you treat other people. My hope is that we can engage each other with compassion, with empathy, with genuine care, curiosity about the circumstances of each other's lives, of our identities, of our experiences. And actually, if you're not curious, that's on you. That's your loss, not mine. But you still have to behave a certain way. Those are behavioral expectations, that to be a productive, contributing member of this community, of this organization, this company, this department, whatever it is, we have behavioral expectations. But that said, I think one of the greatest gifts of leadership is being able to foster contexts where other people can express genuine curiosity about each other. And we don't do that a whole lot. Like, that's not the world we live in. So the more we can do that, the more we're contributing to the quality of our own and each other's existences and day-to-day lives.
Well, what do you let's dive into that a bit then. What have you seen worked when leaders, especially executive leaders, are trying to foster that curiosity and that environment for that? What have you
Yeah.
seen actually work?
Well, I think one of the things is that in most contexts, and again, I spent half my career in the public sector and then half in the private sector so far. Um, Most contexts value decision making at speed. How do we make a call quickly? That's a good thing to value, to say we want to be able to move fast because we're trying to solve a problem or deliver an outcome. Got it. But how do we make sure we protect and engender curiosity first? So before you jump to the conclusion, how do we stop and say, what if we looked at this from a different point of view? How is somebody who is not me or who does not have my identities, background, professional expertise, whatever, live in a different geography? How might they see this differently than I do? To sort
Mhm.
of imagine yourself moving around a table and seeing the problem in the middle of that table from lots of different perspectives. Now, by the way, you don't have to do quite as much imagining when you're surrounded by people who have lots of different identities, backgrounds, experiences, geographic origins, etc. And that seems to be up for debate in the world right now in a way that seems senseless to me. I think we're better at getting to good decisions quickly, the more people that can input on those. But as a leader, how do you create the space to say, before we decide, first we ask,
Mm.
first we interrogate, investigate, explore? What do I think? What do you think? And where do those overlap? Where do we need to challenge each other? Environments that foster inquiry over advocacy tend to come to better conclusions in the long run.
So I'm not sure how far you want to go down this road, but I'm going to take a
Yeah.
step. I'm going to take the next step down this road.
Yeah.
Um, I am 100% agreement with you in regards to it. You cannot be an effective leader and you cannot be an effective organization if you do not have inclusive practices to make sure those individuals who work for you, with you, feel included, because otherwise they're not, one, may not work for you, but two, may not share their ideas and their thoughts and all their energy to help you reach your goals. And if you're not making the public, whoever quote unquote your customer is, not feel included, they're going to buy from someone else. So
Yeah.
this is something that's really important. I think from here, this is a reality. So I was just speaking at a conference a couple weeks ago. Fortune 100, Fortune 200 organizations, chief human capital officers, and so on and so forth. And the conversation was about um, organizations getting much more antsy in regards to DEI
Yeah.
and not engaging in that and backing off those things and so on and so forth and what should happen. Now, I do believe, again, I think that's a great idea for all the purposes that I just said, and I think you all would agree with. But I also challenged everyone in the room to say, hey, look, even though you may not have a DEI office, even though you may not be able to use quote unquote DEI language and terminology, that takes nothing away from how you can engage with your team. That takes nothing away with how you can personally still go out and recruit and be intentional with where you put your opportunities and who you're bringing in your office and table. Like, we can't say just because there's no quote unquote DEI office or no DEI quote unquote program that we as individuals, oh, I guess too bad. I guess it was back how it used to be. Like, it just
Yeah.
that's a really bad cop out.
Yeah. I think what we know over time is that when we leave the efforts related to inclusion to default to the
Mhm.
goodwill of every individual, that goodwill only goes so far. And so part of the reason a lot of these policies and practices and offices and laws have been put into place over the last 30, 40, 50 years was because, again, left to our own devices, we don't always do the thing, even if we know it's the best thing for ourselves or our organizations.
Mhm.
Um, so I want to push organizations that are saying, oh, we're still going to do the right thing, but we have to call it something else. I mean, call it what you want, but think about what is the outcome you're trying to drive
Mhm.
and focus on that. Again, if that
Mhm.
is customer connection, if that is a connection to community for your employees, if that is further inquiry or curiosity, call it whatever you need to, but you can't stop doing the work, not only because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's good for organizations. It's good for organizations, it's good for customers, good for employees, it's good for business. We've got loads of research that demonstrates that over and over again, with one important caveat, and that is that in the short term, more diverse environments perform worse. What does that mean? If you have a situation where you have a crisis to solve within 30 minutes, and you have a team that has never worked together, a team that is more monolithic in terms of its identities is more likely to get to a conclusion faster. When we are trying to put the fire out, now is not the time to debate the different strategies that we might use. We have to use a command and control approach to get the fire out. But that is really the exception. And of course, the thing that makes the difference is as the team gets to know each other and works through developing understanding of each other's identities, backgrounds, areas of geographic origin, communities, perspectives, etc., that team is always going to do better than the team that is more homogeneous.
You know, what's really funny actually is 2 points. One, again, 100% agree. And I always tell people, like, look, diversity is not the end goal. Having a group of people from different places, different backgrounds, different whatever it may be, is great, but that doesn't actually solve your problem. If you don't have that inclusion piece, you're gonna have a whole bunch of people there, and they don't feel like they have voice, right? So, like you said, you can have more diversity in a team, and that mean absolute nothing, because those individuals don't have a voice. Either they don't have a voice, or they don't feel like they have a voice, which is in reality the same thing. Also, it's so funny. I was just leading a 2-day team building retreat out in New Mexico a few weeks ago, and it was so cool because this team had been working together for like literally about 2 years, and we're doing some questions and answers and so on and so forth. And someone was like, "Oh yeah, I have like 7 kids." I was like, "You have 7 kids? We didn't know that." "Oh yeah, hold up, you're in an anime too?" And that you saw all these conversations happening off to the side, and this one person who was super scientific, super technical, and we start talking about their core values, how they're going to implement, again, identify behaviors associated with those core values and implement them to their daily work. And this person brought up compassion. Everyone was like, "Hold up, you brought up compassion? We would have never thought." And this person's like, "Oh yeah, like this is really important." Everyone only saw him as that super science technical dude. And because they saw a different version, different side of this person, they had more connection. So again, these are team building and doing providing that type of space where people can just get to know each other more than just the work they do truly does have value.
No doubt. I mean, I think we probably overestimated this notion of bringing your full self to work. I don't
100%
need
agree.
every one of us to bring our full selves to work all the time. And in fact, I spend a lot of time encouraging leaders and certainly the people on my own teams in the past to think about, how do you protect some parts of yourself from your work? How do you keep some things for you or your family or your friends? But I think there's something about being skillful. I frame it as skillfully authentic, which is how can you choose thoughtfully what parts of yourself you want to bring in and when and in what ways. We don't all always have a choice about those. Sometimes that's about what others attribute to us based on their perceptions of us. But how can we thoughtfully and intentionally be able to bring in the best parts of ourselves in ways that are good for us and good for everybody around us? It sounds so sort of matter of fact. It doesn't seem all that complex or controversial. And yet I think what it's come to represent for people has become a source of controversy. And we're in an operating environment where we have to ask ourselves now, how do we keep what makes us good? Good as people, good as communities, good as companies, good for the world, good for our lives, our businesses, our souls, and be able to continue to operate. I'm a pragmatist as a leader. You know, I spent 6 years as a CEO of a global firm. You have to make trade-offs. You have to make choices. But how do you make choices that allow you to do what you believe to be right on?
Well, I guess I feel like this shouldn't be that difficult. I do feel like we've had historically we've done well in regards to navigating what was appropriate and what was not appropriate to work historically, not all the time. However, I think there was a huge pendulum swing towards work is work, home is home, keep them separate, and
Yes.
that does not work. We know that's not real. Then there's a massive pendulum swing the other way. Oh, I should bring my whole authentic self to work, and that is absolutely not smart. Because
Yeah.
some of us have authentic self that can get us in trouble.
Yeah.
Some of us have authentic self that can hurt other people, right? Even if we
Yeah.
don't intend to, we can harm other people.
Yeah.
But I tell people, like, here's the reality. I am me. I am me all the time.
Yeah.
But who I am with my mom is a very different person than who I may be with my wife.
Yeah.
May be with my best friend, maybe at work. Like, and those are all authentic versions of me, but I'm
Yeah.
not putting everything out in all those different spaces.
Yeah.
So I guess my next question in on this is, again, tying this to back to our executive leaders, to our audience.
Yeah.
Um, there is also a tendency to, at that level, at that higher level, a tendency to be even less likely to share, because that could be ammo used against you later on by employees who don't like you, by competitors, by you're just worried. Oh my God, if I share this thought, one of the reasons why I have these relationships with executive leaders is because they know I won't share anything. But they're like, if I share a raw thought, just ideation, someone could say, "Oh, such and such said this," and now it's a big thing. Like, how do they gauge? How do you recommend they gauge how much to share of themselves?
Yep. I'm a believer that I think sharing of yourself personally is really important. It's a critical component of leadership. I am not a believer that leaders can be sort of walled off. I still, though, I come back to this notion of skillful authenticity. How do you choose what to show in what ways and when? And you're not always going to get it right. We've got this great example in the last 2 weeks of Jamie Dimon going on a furious tirade about his view about people not wanting to return to the offices of JP Morgan Chase, and then having to come out with a statement and say, look, I probably didn't express that in the best way, but it's really how I feel, and it's really going to be our policy. And I thought, whatever damage some people may feel that he did, and I'm not sure that it was all that much, in expressing his unfettered and quite emotional view about return to office, the way that he engaged with the course correction showed humility, showed authenticity, skillful authenticity,
Mhm,
showed that he was not going to make an emotional decision, but that he could still be an emotional person. And you know
mhm,
what? If we can't be human with each other, there's no incentive for people to continue to work in the ways that we have for so long. Work world's been disrupted over and over again in the last 5 years. What I
mhm,
spend time on with CEOs now is completely different from what I spent time on with CEOs 10 years ago. Completely different. It's a
mhm.
totally different job. And that's in part because work has been and will continue to be disrupted. If you can't be human with the people that are putting themselves, their lives, their well being on the line for and with you as a leader every day, they're not going to keep doing it because they don't have to anymore.
Yeah, it, everything you just said. And I can add on, the other piece I'm consistently talking to executive leaders about right now is, two things can be right. Like, I feel like we are in, we not feel like we are in a time where either you support A or you support B.
Yes.
Either you're for it or you're against it. And in
Yeah.
most instances in life, you probably should be somewhere in the middle. Um,
Yeah.
but yet we are, again, just using this example again. I wasn't paying attention to the JP Morgan piece, but it's like bringing everyone to work because everyone needs to be at work. That doesn't make real sense, generally speaking. Not all roles, positions need to be in person. Um, is in person is in person important? Absolutely. Can we be intentional about how we bring teams together in certain days and fly people out? We don't have certain locations and so on and so forth. Yes, I just think that we have to get away. We have to get away as leaders from buying into this social phenomenon right now, that either you agree with something or you disagree with it. And if you agree with something, you must hate the other thing, because that's not reality. I mean, just like most of us, I'm trying to come up with a dumb example real quick. It's like I don't like apples. Okay, cool. Does that mean I don't like all fruit? Like I'm against fruit now? Like, no, it just means I don't particularly care for that. So in your response to that, I want to change directions just a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one of the gifts of our of living in the time that we live in is that every one of us walks around with a supercomputer in our pockets. We can access nearly all of the information from all of humanity in a matter of seconds with a device that we carry in our pockets. That's pretty extraordinary when you think about the totality of humanity. Not a thing I spend a ton of time thinking about, but useful once in a while. And that has a shadow side to it too, which is that we've lost a lot of nuance. The notion that that we can spend some time really saying, well, I agree with this part and I disagree with this part, and here's why. And so here's how I can make sense of this as a result. We live in sound bites, we live in factoids, we live in those information bits that we can get quickly out of our pockets. And so the problem with that is we are not creating contexts that foster curiosity. It's similar to the theme I mentioned earlier of something that leaders can do, but it's also something that we can do in our own lives and say, before I jump to an answer, where did I get this idea from? Do I really think this about all of it? And do I have to move so fast to conclude that I'm right? Not easy. Not easy.
You literally just took us full circle and where the conversation began with this. There is a huge value right now on acting quickly. And yes, being able to make a quick decision as a leader can definitely be of value. And being able to slow down as a leader, being able to slow things down before you make a decision, before everyone freaks out, and figure out, okay, what is the best, how much time do we actually have to make this decision before we rush to making a decision, and then moving forward. That's a value add as well. So again, it's not that you should never be able to make quick decisions or you should always make quick decisions. It's somewhere in between, based on the context. I'd love to hear from you, what is the best bit of executive advice that you've received? Who gave it to you, and why do you feel like that was the best bit of executive advice?
I've been very lucky to be the beneficiary of a lot of advice over the years, but the piece that I probably come back to is long before I was an executive. I was a teenager, and yet this advice I think has borne out well and repeatedly in my years as an executive and advising executives. This is a gentleman by the name of Titus Higgins out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. He was a teacher in a summer program. He is a photographer, artist, educator, longtime civil rights activist. And he said to me, Eric, those who feel discomfort easily are charged with the obligation of making others aware. Be sensitive to the discomfort of others because they are your allies. And I thought, my God, what a profound. Actually, at first, this is true. At first, I was pissed off. I was like, who are you telling me how I should think about stuff? Like, I don't know you, whatever. Then when I got out of my ego for a minute, it is one of the gifts of my life to get this bit of wisdom from this incredible educator. This notion that the way that we find our way through the world and that we become part of communities and align ourselves with others is by understanding others' experiences. And that when we feel discomfort, it's not about focusing only on ourselves and soothing and resolving our own discomfort, but instead about connecting with the stories, journeys, lives, experiences, leadership, communities of people who are different from us. Incredible gift. Best advice I ever got.
That's huge. It's, for me, what I'm also hearing is the difference between perception is how I see the world, and the difference between that and perception and, oh my goodness, there's another word for it, but I can't think right now. But it's basically how someone else sees the world, like you said, and that is I think the key of successful leadership and effective leadership is, yes, absolutely, I should know how I see the world, and like you said, we should kind of understand why we see the world like this. And I need other people. And not everyone's going to adapt my way of thinking. So the best way to influence and help people understand my perspective is to look at it from their perspective and see where that bridge is, where those connections are. And maybe even again, like you said, looking at their perspective will say, oh shoot, this is their concern. Maybe if I can address this, they'll be on my side. So I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's it surprises me how often it comes in handy, even more than 30 years later. Incredible gift.
Last piece on this, you said something else too. You talked about the connections, the relationships that you have with other people. And I was just speaking on this last night. I was telling you I was doing this class last night,
Yeah.
and I kind of went off on a tangent for a moment. I said, look, the reality is that all of us, can we all agree that everyone in this room is not seeing the same thing? Like we are literally seeing different things from different perspectives, and everything is filtered through our experiences, our culture, the culture of our family, our organization, our race, our religion, our country, our state, our geographic within the state, like our education. Everything provides another filter on how we interpret those things around us. And I said, this whole idea of being creative and being able to think outside the box, I think that is a farce, that you can do that by yourself, because even when you think of something new, it still comes from your box, your perception. So you have to have relationships with other people and or consume new information in order to get you to think outside of your paradigm, outside of your perspective.
No doubt, no doubt. It is easy and sometimes really soothing to try to surround ourselves with perspectives that hew closely to our own. But it's not sustainable for us as individuals or for the world more generally. And I think that's going to be tested over the coming weeks, months, years, and beyond, as we try to figure out how do we connect with people who just see the world really differently than we do, no matter where we sit around that table.
So this question is going to come out of left field,
Okay.
admittedly. I've had this question written down for my last 4 interviews. I haven't got to it, so I'm going to push this question in here because I want to hear your thoughts.
All right.
So what is a hard truth that you had to learn that made you a better leader? A hard truth.
Sometimes we are we learn the most when we are at our worst. And so I think when we are in leadership positions, we strive to be at our best. But being a great leader means being a great learner forever. And that means that we've got to screw stuff up. We've got to get things wrong. And so when you are someone who has aspiration to be great at what you do, to support other people, the notion that you have to be at your worst sometimes is a really painful one. But sometimes you have to be at your worst in order to learn how to be at your best.
I hope so. As our listeners are listening to this, I hope that you are taking a moment to even pause and just think about this, even pushing pause and think about this. Because I would challenge everyone to think, if there's anything good in your life right now, something hard probably came before that, which caused you to get better, which caused you to learn something new, which caused you to do something different, which led you to where you are now. But I that's such a great lesson to share. Thank you so much for sharing that, Eric.
Thank you for the question. You're right. It came out of left field, and I almost I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but that's lived experience, as you said at the beginning of our time together today, Alex. And and one that I think every single one of us has expertise in, like it or not.
I want to, when you wrapped up your answer, I didn't take the time to think about the answer myself. And then
Yeah.
when you said yours, I go like, okay, how would I answer that? Do you mind if I share my answer, and then I would like to hear
Yeah.
your reaction to it?
Yeah.
Um, I A hard truth I had to learn is that you can do everything right and still not be liked by other people.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I think that one was hard. Like, you're leading a team, you're supporting them, you're doing everything you possibly can to help them reach their goals and so on and so forth. But because of the baggage they have, right? Nothing you did wrong, but maybe they experienced a bad leader in the past. So again, their filter, they see everything you did as bad, whatever it may be. But you could do everything right and still have a very difficult time with your team. And I do think the world holds leaders to a super high standard nowadays. Like, if something's wrong, what did the leader do? And sometimes
Yeah.
the leader did everything right. And there's nothing else.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. This gets attributed to Steve Jobs. I don't know if it really came from him or not, but supposedly he said, if you want to be liked, don't be a leader, sell ice cream. And I think the truth in it, wherever it came from, is that leadership is not about being liked or loved. Leadership
Mm,
is about creating conditions for other people to be able to
mm.
achieve something together, to be able to actualize their full selves, to be able to deliver on an ambition. But it's not about getting them to love you. That's not leadership. That's not leadership.
I'm going to open the floor for you, but I just want to say I love that. I love what you just shared right now. I'm going to make sure I write that down, because at the end of the day, like I said, leadership is not about you being liked or loved. It's about you creating the the you said
Conditions,
the
creating the conditions.
conditions for others to be, hopefully, like love, not even like love, but just hopefully they can be successful. Because
Yes.
as a leader, you can't be successful on your own. It is your team. Your success comes from your team. So that, yeah, I really love that. Eric, I know we have to wrap up soon and you have to get going. Um, is there anything I'd like to share with the audience as we wrap up? Is there anything you want them to walk away knowing, remembering, as
Yeah.
we wrap up our time today?
Every single one of us is going to be challenged to and tested on what we believe about right and wrong, about what is helpful and what is harmful, and about what the people around us want and need from us in ways that perhaps we never have before. Take some time, make some time to interrogate, investigate, understand, where do you get your ideas of right and wrong? Do you really understand what it's like for someone who has a different perspective from you? And how can you do that? Do you understand the ethical context that you're operating in? And do you know, when you are faced in the moment with a difficult decision, how you will comport yourself and what you will do? Because you're not going to have time to stop and think when the moment comes. So stop and think now. Stop and think now, every day, every night, every morning. And give yourself both generosity and grace to be able to lead in the moment when the moment inevitably comes.
Eric, that is a super powerful way to conclude our time today. And I want to say one last thing in regards to what you shared.
Yeah.
Um, I really do not think that most people who end up doing something unethical, immoral, um, potentially even illegal, I don't think that most people out of the blue just say, I want to do this bad thing. Um, it's a series of small decisions that they make that takes them down this pipe road, this road, right? And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Oh, I guess if that I did that, so this was not that bad, or I did this, and maybe it's not. And so you end up at a place where you would have never thought you'd end up. And I think, as Eric said, this is why it's so important to identify today. How will you respond to these things when they happen? Because something will happen. How will you respond? Make a commitment to yourself so when you are in that situation, it's not you trying to figure out how to respond. It's you knowing, I've thought about this. This is how I'm going to respond because this is who I am. So Eric, you have been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. For those of you who really love what Eric has said, do me a favor, click the like button. Make sure you say thank you. Say something in the chat box. Just what was the big thing you learned? What the big takeaway you learned from today's session? Please share that. You all know where I'm going with this. If you found anything of value today, don't just look back, reach back. Don't say that person, this person, your friend, your colleague, your mentee should have been here. Just send them the link. It's not that difficult, right? You click here, you click copy, and you send it, right? You can send a text, you can send this. Make sure you share it out, because if you found something of value, I promise you they will find something of value as well. So I encourage everyone, as always, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving. See ya. Thanks for listening to The Executive Appeal with Alex Tremble. I invite you to follow The Executive Appeal wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow me, your host, Alex Tremble, across all socials or via email for exclusive webinars, courses, and speaking engagements on continued topics of executive leadership. So until next time, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving.